How long do you think a migrant should have to live, work, pay taxes and support themselves in the UK before they are entitled to equal social and political rights, including support from the state? If your answer is around the ballpark of 5 years or less, then you are with most of us, my friend. The National Centre for Social Research did some polling this summer that found that 47% of Brits believe that a migrant should have access to welfare support after 5 years or less. 11% of people thought that migrants should wait for 10 years or more. So much less people. And obviously I find that really interesting from a number of angles. This current system is that migrants have to wait an absolute minimum of 5 years before they can access welfare support. So most migrants actually wait for longer than that. And many migrants are on a 10-year route. So the minimum they will have to wait is 10 years before they're on a pathway towards permanent settlement or access to the welfare state. And so what that means is just 11% of the public support the level of restriction that we have at the current time on a lot of migrants. And many, many more people would support a more open and inclusive approach to migrant integration. I know this is a lot of statistics, but essentially what it tells us is that people's attitudes towards immigration are more positive than they are often presented to be. Let me explain. The top line sort of narrative about immigration at the moment is that you can just waltz into the country and get a council house straight away. And I think most British people, despite being kind and generous people, don't think that that's a system that would work very well. And they say, no, I think, you should have to work here and be able to support yourself for at least a year, maybe even 5 years, before you're entitled to access that kind of support. But that's the system we already have. The first system is a lie. It doesn't exist. People aren't entitled to access the welfare state on arrival. People have to work here as either 5 years or 10 years as an absolute minimum before they're entitled to that kind of benefit. And this just once again goes to show that our politics on migration are being led by a false impression of what the public actually want. A minority of people actually want a much more restrictive system than the one we really have when it's explained to them. The system we have now is actually more restrictive than the one they would design. I know this is an emotive and a difficult topic, but I think it's so important that we actually have a conversation about what we think a good system would be. And part of that is teasing out what real people's, ordinary people's opinions actually are. And ordinary people's opinions are that if you've been living and working here for 5 years, then you should have access to the support of the state. And that's not the system we have. In fact, we have a much harsher system than that, but we're never talking about the details of the system because we're too busy screaming about boats. Listen, I think the boats are important, but they made up 5.5% of immigration to the UK last year, right? And everybody else who's coming here, we have such a restrictive system, a system that is not reflected by what the British people want, a system that doesn't work well, and a system that every political party seems to have decided needs to get worse and harsher and more restrictive. People are presented with a totally distorted image of what immigration actually is like in the UK. But actually, if you ask people, how would you design the immigration system? Well, it's a kinder and more sensible system than the one we have now.